The last stitch fell into place as I held up the quilt, my heart swelling with pride. 6 months of work, countless pricked fingers, and every memory I could pour into fabric had culminated in this moment. I'm Ariel, and quilting isn't just my hobby, it's how I tell my family's story. Mom, are you still working on that? Henry's voice carried from the doorway of my craft room. My son's familiar footsteps approached, and I couldn't help but smile as he leaned down to kiss my cheek. Just finished, actually. I smoothed my hand over the intricate pattern, a blend of blues and greens that would perfectly match the nursery they were planning. What do you think? Henry traced the detailed butterfly I'd embroidered in the corner, the same design my grandmother had taught me to sew when I was 12. It's beautiful, Mom. Really beautiful. Each square has a story, I said, pointing to different sections. This fabric is from your baby blanket, and this one is from the dress I wore when you took your first steps. Oakley's going to love it, Henry said, but something in his voice made me look up. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Henry, what aren't you telling me? He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. It's just, Oakley's been talking about doing a modern nursery. All white, very minimalist. She's been ordering everything from this fancy European designer. Oh, the word felt small in my throat. Well, maybe she could use it as an accent piece? Yeah, maybe. He squeezed my shoulder. Listen, she's coming over in an hour to look at the renovation plans for the guest room. Maybe you could show her then? I nodded, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. Oakley had always been particular. Since the day Henry brought her home, she'd made it clear that her taste ran more toward designer labels than handmade treasures. When the doorbell rang exactly 60 minutes later, I was waiting in the living room with the quilt folded neatly on the coffee table. Oakley swept in wearing what looked like a $1,000 outfit, her perfectly styled hair bouncing as she air-kissed my cheek. Ariel, darling, how are you? She didn't wait for an answer before turning to Henry. Baby, did you get the paint samples I sent? Actually, I cut in, standing up. I have something I'd love to show you first. I lifted the quilt, letting it unfold to its full glory. I just finished it for the baby. Oakley's perfectly penciled eyebrows rose slightly. Oh, how rustic. Each piece tells a story, I began, but she was already pulling out her phone. Speaking of the nursery, you have to see these fabrics I found. They're from this amazing Scandinavian designer. She turned her phone screen toward Henry, completely ignoring the quilt I still held. Oakley, Henry said quietly, Mom worked really hard on this. She glanced at the quilt again, her lips curving into what might have been a smile, but felt more like a smirk. It's very sweet, Ariel. Very country craft fare. But we're going for something more sophisticated for the nursery. You understand, right? The words hit like a slap. I carefully folded the quilt, my fingers trembling slightly. Of course. I just thought, oh, don't worry, Oakley chirped, reaching out to pat my arm condescendingly. Maybe we can use it in the guest room, or donate it to that church drive you're always going on about. I watched as she pulled Henry toward the kitchen, already chattering about paint swatches and custom furniture. The quilt in my arms suddenly felt heavy with all its rejected memories and love. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend Cadence. How did it go with the quilt? I stared at the message, then at the quilt, then at Oakley's designer handbag casually tossed on my couch. Something shifted inside me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just hurt anymore. It was determination. I picked up my phone and typed, "Can you come over tonight? I need your advice on something." Because if Oakley thought handmade meant worthless, she had a lot to learn about the value of tradition. And I was just the person to teach her that lesson. Looking down at the quilt one last time, I ran my fingers over the butterfly embroidery, my grandmother's signature pattern. Don't worry, I whispered to it. She'll learn to appreciate you, one way or another. From the kitchen, I could hear Oakley's laugh, high and clear, as she discussed her vision for my future grandchild's perfect nursery. She had no idea what was coming. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come wrapped in the most unexpected packages, or in this case, quilts. The baby shower venue sparkled with expensive decorations, all whites and silvers that screamed Instagram-worthy. I clutched my gift bag, the carefully wrapped quilt inside, and tried to blend in with the crowd of Oakley's fashionable friends. "Ariel!" Cadence appeared at my side, champagne flute in hand. "I almost didn't recognize you. You look gorgeous." I smoothed down the new dress I'd bought specifically for today. "Thanks. I figured I should make an effort given the crowd." "Smart move." Cadence lowered her voice. "Did you bring it?" Before I could answer, Oakley's voice rang out across the room. "Everyone! Thank you all so much for coming to celebrate our little miracle." She stood at the front of the room, radiant in a designer maternity dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Henry stood beside her, beaming with pride, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Time for gifts." Oakley clapped her hands. "Mother-in-law first, of course." My stomach clenched as I made my way forward. This wasn't how I'd planned it, but maybe it was better this way. I noticed Annalise, Henry's grandmother, watching intently from her seat of honor. "Here you go," I said, handing over the bag. "I hope you'll reconsider using it." Oakley's perfectly manicured hands pulled out the quilt, letting it unfold dramatically. A collective "ooh" rose from the crowd, but Oakley's expression remained fixed in a polite smile. "Oh, Ariel," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "You really shouldn't have gone to all this trouble, especially after our conversation about the nursery's aesthetic." "I thought maybe you'd changed your mind," I said quietly. "Well, it's very—" Oakley paused, scanning the room with a growing smirk. "What's the word I'm looking for? Rustic? No. Primitive might be more accurate." Titters of laughter rippled through her friends. My cheeks burned. "I mean, look at these stitches, everyone." She held up the quilt, pointing at the detailed butterfly. "It's like something from a pioneer museum. Can you imagine this in our modern nursery?" More laughter. I caught Henry shifting uncomfortably, but he remained silent. "Oakley," I started, but she wasn't finished. "And these fabric choices? I think I saw something similar at that discount craft store in the mall. You know, the one with all the artificial flowers and potpourri?" The room erupted in giggles. I saw Annalise's eyes narrow, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Actually," I managed, my voice stronger than I felt, "each piece of fabric has special meaning. That square there is from Henry's baby blanket." "Oh, how quaint." Oakley's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, we'll certainly find some use for it. Maybe as a drop cloth when we paint the nursery." That drew the biggest laugh yet. I watched my grandson's future wrapped in 6 months of love and memories being carelessly tossed aside like yesterday's newspaper. "Excuse me," I said, turning to leave, but Annalise's voice cut through the laughter. "Oakley, dear, might I see that quilt?" The room fell silent. Annalise's opinion carried weight, especially with Oakley, who was desperate to maintain her standing in the family's social circle. "Of course," Oakley said quickly, carrying the quilt to her grandmother-in-law. I watched as Annalise's weathered hands traced the patterns, lingering on the butterfly embroidery. Her eyes met mine for a brief moment, and I saw something there. Recognition, perhaps. "Interesting," was all she said, before carefully folding the quilt and handing it back. Oakley's smile faltered slightly. "Shall we move on to the next gift?" I slipped away to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. Cadence followed me in. "That little witch," she hissed. "Are you okay?" I dried my hands, meeting my own eyes in the mirror. "You know what? I am. Because now I know exactly what I need to do." "What's that?" "Did you see how Oakley reacted when Annalise asked to see the quilt? How quickly her attitude changed?" Cadence's eyes widened. "You're not thinking—" "Oh, I am." I straightened my shoulders. "Oakley wants to play society games? Fine. But she's about to learn that some of us have been playing them a lot longer than she has." "What are you planning?" I smiled, remembering the way Annalise had studied that butterfly embroidery. "Let's just say that by the time the baby arrives, Oakley's going to wish she'd treated that quilt, and me, with a lot more respect." From outside, we could hear Oakley's voice exclaiming over another gift, but this time the sound didn't sting, because now I had a plan, and if there's one thing I'd learned from quilting, It's that the most beautiful patterns often come from the most unexpected pieces. You want to do what? Cadence nearly spilled her coffee across my kitchen table. 2 days after the baby shower disaster, we were plotting my next move. I'm going to make Oakley realize exactly what she rejected, I said, pulling out my grandmother's old photo album. And Annalise is the key. Explain. I flipped through the album until I found what I was looking for. A yellowed photograph of my grandmother standing next to an elegant woman, both holding an identical quilt with the signature butterfly pattern. See this woman? That's Annalise's sister, Margaret. They were part of the same quilting circle in the 1960s. My grandmother taught them both this specific butterfly pattern. Cadence leaned forward, squinting at the photo. Wait, so that pattern is a direct connection to Annalise's family history, one that Oakley knows nothing about. The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Henry stood on the porch, looking uncomfortable. Mom, can we talk? I led him to the living room, Cadence excusing herself to make more coffee. I'm sorry about the baby shower, he said, sitting heavily on the couch. I should have said something. Yes, you should have. I kept my voice level. Your wife humiliated me in front of everyone. She's under a lot of pressure. Her family, they have certain expectations. And what about your family's expectations, Henry? What about respect? He ran his hands through his hair, that nervous habit again. Oakley's trying to impress Annalise. You know how important family standing is to her. Oh, I know. I couldn't help but smile slightly. How is Annalise, by the way? Actually, she's been asking about you, about the quilt, specifically. Something about the butterfly pattern reminded her of her sister. Perfect. Really? How interesting. I picked up my phone as it buzzed, a text from Annalise herself. My heart skipped. Mom? Henry looked concerned. What are you planning? Nothing, sweetheart. Just thinking about family traditions. After Henry left, Cadence emerged from the kitchen. Well, I showed her Annalise's text. Dear Ariel, I'd love to discuss your quilting technique over tea tomorrow. The butterfly pattern brought back such memories. It's happening, Cadence whispered. But are you sure about this? It could backfire. I opened my craft room door, revealing the wall of quilts I'd created over the years. Each one told a story. Births, weddings, anniversaries. But there, in the center, hung my grandmother's original quilt, complete with the butterfly pattern that would be my secret weapon. My grandmother used to say that every quilt tells a truth, I said, running my fingers over the familiar pattern. It's time Oakley learned about this one. My phone buzzed again, this time a message from Oakley. Having lunch with Annalise tomorrow. She's being weird about that quilt thing. What did you say to her? Nothing yet, I murmured, typing back a non-committal response. But I will. Cadence picked up the photo album, studying the old picture. You know, this is almost poetic, using Oakley's own social climbing against her. It's not just about revenge, I said, though part of me knew that wasn't entirely true. It's about teaching her the value of family history, of tradition. And humiliating her in front of the one person whose opinion she actually cares about is just a bonus, I smiled. Let's call it a teaching moment. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for tea with Annalise, carefully selecting which family photos to bring, which stories to tell. The butterfly pattern wasn't just a design, it was a key to unlocking decades of family connection that Oakley, in her rush to be modern and sophisticated, had carelessly dismissed. My phone buzzed one more time. Henry again. Mom, whatever you're planning, just remember she's carrying your grandchild. I stared at the message for a long moment, guilt and determination wrestling in my chest. Finally, I typed back. Sometimes the most important lessons are the hardest to learn. Looking up at my grandmother's quilt, I could almost hear her voice. Every stitch tells a story, dear. Make sure yours is worth telling. Tomorrow, over tea with Annalise, I would begin weaving a story that would change everything. Oakley thought she'd won at the baby shower, but she was about to learn that in matters of family and tradition, the game was far from over. Ready for tomorrow? Cadence asked, gathering her things to leave. I nodded. already picturing Oakley's face when she realized what she'd so publicly mocked. More than ready. It's time to show her that some things are worth more than designer labels and Instagram likes. The butterfly pattern seemed to shimmer in the late afternoon light, a silent witness to what was about to unfold. Annalise's historic Victorian home smelled of Earl Grey and old books. I sat across from her in the formal living room, watching as she traced the butterfly pattern in my grandmother's photograph with a trembling finger. "Margaret and I learned this pattern in 1962, she said, her voice soft with memory. "Your grandmother was so patient with us. We were terrible students at first." "She always said the butterfly was special," I replied, carefully setting my teacup down. "A family signature." "Indeed." Annalise's eyes met mine sharply. "Which is why I was quite surprised to see it at the baby shower. That pattern hasn't been used outside our circle in decades." Before I could respond, the front door opened. Oakley's voice rang out. "Grandma Anna, I brought those organic scones you like." She froze in the doorway, seeing me. "Ariel, what a surprise." "Oakley, dear," Annalise said. "Perfect timing. We were just discussing family traditions." Oakley's perfectly composed face flickered with uncertainty. She set down her shopping bag and perched on the edge of a chair, her designer dress rustling. "How fascinating," she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "Show her the photograph, Ariel," Annalise instructed. I handed over the yellowed image. Oakley's carefully manicured nails gripped the edges as her eyes widened. "Is that you, Grandma Anna?" "With my sister Margaret, and Ariel's grandmother, who taught us this very special pattern." Annalise reached for the photo. "The same pattern you found so primitive, I believe was the word?" The color drained from Oakley's face. I had no idea." "Clearly." Annalise's voice could have frozen water. "That butterfly pattern has been passed down through generations of our family's most treasured quilters." "But I thought—" Oakley shot me a panicked look. "Ariel never said—" "You never asked, dear." I sipped my tea, enjoying the moment perhaps more than I should have. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked heavily through the silence. "I should go," Oakley finally said, standing abruptly. "I have a doctor's appointment." "Actually," Annalise said, "I'd like you to stay. There's more to discuss about family traditions." The doorbell rang again, and moments later, Henry appeared in the doorway. "Mom! Oakley! What's going on?" "Henry!" Oakley rushed to his side. "I didn't know you were coming." "Grandma Anna called me," he said, looking confused. "Said it was important." "Sit down, everyone," Annalise commanded. No one dared disobey. I watched as she slowly stood and walked to an antique chest in the corner. From it, she pulled a quilt, aged but beautiful, with the same butterfly pattern prominently displayed. "This," she said, "was my wedding quilt. Margaret and I made matching ones, guided by your grandmother, Ariel. It was meant to be passed down through the generations." Oakley's hands twisted in her lap. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Yes, it is. Which is why I was deeply disappointed to hear you mock its modern incarnation at your shower. Grandma Anna, I'm so sorry. If I'd known that it was connected to me?" "That's rather the point, isn't it? You shouldn't need a social connection to respect something made with love." Henry reached for Oakley's hand. "Mom's quilt really is special, Oak. I should have said something at the shower." "The nursery," Oakley blurted out. Maybe we could incorporate both? The modern elements and the quilt?" I caught Annalise hiding a small smile behind her teacup. "That would be lovely," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "Perhaps," Annalise added, refolding her wedding quilt, "you'd like to learn the pattern yourself, Oakley? It is a family tradition, after all." Oakley's eyes darted between the quilt, Annalise, and me. I'd like that." As we left Annalise's house an hour later, I overheard Oakley whisper to Henry, "Did you know about the connection?" "No," he replied, "but maybe this is a sign we need to pay more attention to family history." Walking to my car, I felt Annalise's hand on my arm. "Well played," she murmured, "though perhaps a bit cruel." Sometimes lessons need to sting to be remembered, I replied. She patted my hand. Just like your grandmother, steel wrapped in silk. Now shall we schedule Oakley's first quilting lesson for next week? I smiled, watching Oakley and Henry drive away. My revenge had worked perhaps better than I'd planned, but something unexpected had happened too. Through this web of family history and hurt feelings, a new pattern was emerging, one that might just bring us all closer together. But first, Oakley had some humble pie to finish eating, and I was going to enjoy watching every bite. The second baby shower was even more extravagant than the first. Oakley had rented out the grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel, and everywhere I looked, there were ice sculptures and crystal centerpieces catching the light. She's really going all out to impress Annalise, isn't she? Cadence whispered, adjusting her dress. Look at all this. I nodded, watching Oakley flit from group to group, her designer maternity gown floating around her like a cloud. But something was different this time. She kept glancing nervously at the door. Waiting for someone? I asked when she passed by. Oakley startled. Oh, Ariel, yes, actually. Grandma Anna said she'd be here at 2. She twisted her hands together. You don't think she's changed her mind about coming, do you? Annalise never changes her mind, I said, hiding my smile behind my champagne glass. She'll be here. Right on cue, Annalise made her entrance, carrying a large wrapped package. The room seemed to hold its breath. Grandma Anna! Oakley rushed forward, nearly tripping over her gown. You came! Of course I did, dear. And I brought something special. Annalise's eyes met mine across the room. Ariel, would you join us? I made my way over as Oakley carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was Annalise's wedding quilt, the butterfly pattern gleaming like new. But this is yours, Oakley whispered. It's a family piece, Annalise corrected. And since you've shown such interest in learning our traditions lately, I thought it should be displayed at your shower. Oakley's eyes filled with tears. Could we put it next to Ariel's? The room went silent. Everyone remembered how Oakley had mocked my quilt at the first shower. I saw Henry step closer, protective concern on his face. I think that would be perfect, I said, pulling my quilt from its bag. Together, we arranged both quilts on the display table, the butterfly patterns matching perfectly. Ladies and gentlemen, Annalise announced to the room, you're looking at over 60 years of family history. The butterfly pattern you see here has been passed down through generations of our family's most talented quilters. I watched Oakley's face as her society friends crowded around, oohing and eyeing over the quilts they'd previously dismissed. Her cheeks flushed pink. Ariel, she said quietly, would you tell them about the pattern? For a moment, I considered letting her stew in her embarrassment, but something in her eyes, genuine interest, perhaps even regret, made me soften. The butterfly represents transformation, I began, and the crowd leaned in. Each one is unique, just like the quilter who creates it. And like the baby who receives it, Oakley added unexpectedly. That's why I've decided to use both quilts in the nursery, to honor our family's past while embracing the future. Henry's jaw dropped. Even Annalise looked surprised. But what about your modern aesthetic? Someone called out. Oakley squared her shoulders. Some things are more important than trending designs, like family and tradition. She turned to me. And mothers-in-law who are patient enough to teach us that. The room burst into appreciative murmurs. I caught Cadence wiping away a tear. Speaking of teaching, Annalise said loudly, Oakley has been taking quilting lessons. Would you like to show everyone your progress? Oakley blushed deeper, but pulled out a small square of fabric from her purse. The butterfly pattern was wobbly and uneven, but unmistakable. It's not very good yet, she admitted. But it's authentic, I said, and that's what matters. As the party continued around us, Oakley pulled me aside. I know what you did, she said softly. With Annalise and the family connection, you could have humiliated me. Would that have helped? She shook her head. No, and I'm sorry. About before. I was so focused on impressing everyone that I forgot what really matters. And what's that? Family, Real connections, not just social ones. She touched her growing belly. I want my baby to understand that too. From across the room, Annalise caught my eye and nodded approvingly. My plan for revenge had transformed into something else entirely, just like the butterfly pattern itself. Your stitches are too loose on the wings, I said to Oakley. Come over tomorrow and I'll show you how to tighten them. Her face lit up. Really? Really? After all, I smiled. We're family, and family traditions need to be passed down properly. As I watched Oakley proudly show off her practice square to her friends, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's simply opening the door to understanding and letting transformation happen on its own. But I still couldn't help feeling a little satisfied when I overheard one of Oakley's designer friends asking about quilting lessons. The nursery was a perfect blend of old and new, crisp white walls offset by both quilts displayed prominently. I stood in the doorway watching Oakley fuss with the arrangement for the 100th time. Maybe we should move your quilt to this wall, she asked, already reaching for it. The morning light would hit the butterfly pattern just right. Careful, I warned. You'll strain yourself. I'm pregnant, not invalid, she huffed, but let her hands drop. At 8 months, her designer maternity wear had given way to comfortable leggings and oversized sweaters. Is everything ready for the nursery reveal party tomorrow? I asked, straightening a picture frame. Oakley's face fell slightly. About that. I need your help, and please don't say I told you so. What happened? She pulled out her phone, showing me a social media post from one of her influencer friends. Remember Amanda? The one who laughed the loudest about the quilt at the first shower? I nodded, reading the post. Can't wait to show off my authentic, handcrafted nursery pieces tomorrow. Traditional meets modern family heirloom. She bought a mass-produced quilt from an online store and is planning to pass it off as a family piece, Oakley said, disgusted. She knows everyone loved our quilts at the shower and now she's trying to copy it. And this bothers you because it's fake, Oakley exploded. She doesn't understand what these quilts mean. The history, the stories, the time it takes to learn each stitch. She's making a mockery of everything you and Grandma Anna taught me. I bit back a smile, remembering how Oakley herself had once dismissed handmade items. The doorbell rang, and Henry's voice called up the stairs. Mom, Oak, Grandma Anna's here. Annalise entered the nursery like a queen, her eyes taking in every detail. Well, you've done a beautiful job blending the styles. Thank you, Oakley said. But we have a situation. She explained about Amanda's planned deception. Annalise's eyes sparkled. And what do you propose to do about it? I have an idea, Oakley said slowly, but I'll need both of you to help. The next day, the nursery was packed with Oakley's social circle, all cooing over the decor. Amanda stood near the quilts, holding court. My grandmother made this one, she was saying, gesturing to her store-bought quilt. It's been in our family for generations. How fascinating, Annalise cut in. Ariel, doesn't that pattern look familiar? I stepped closer, studying the quilt. It does indeed. Wasn't this design featured in that mass-market catalog last month? Amanda's face flushed. I don't think so. Oh, but it was, Oakley joined in, her voice carrying across the room. In fact, she pulled out her phone, showing a screenshot of the exact quilt for sale online. Here it is, 40% off last week. The room went deadly quiet. I can explain, Amanda stammered. No need, Oakley said coolly. But since we're all here to appreciate authentic family traditions, perhaps you'd like to hear about real quilting? She gestured to her practice piece, now framed on the wall. This was my first attempt at the butterfly pattern. It's terrible, honestly, but it's real. And that matters more than any staged perfection. Oakley, Amanda tried again. You of all people should understand about maintaining appearances. The old me would have, Oakley cut her off. But I learned something important recently. True value isn't in how things look on Instagram. It's in the love and history they carry. I watched in amazement as my daughter-in-law, once so focused on surface impressions, effectively dismantled Amanda's social standing with nothing but the truth. Now, Oakley continued, who'd like to see the actual quilting process? My mother-in-law is an excellent teacher. As the crowd gathered around my impromptu quilting demonstration, I caught Annalise's proud smile. Oakley stood nearby, one hand on her belly, the other tracing the butterfly pattern on my quilt. "You've created quite a transformation," Annalise murmured to me. "I didn't do anything," I replied. "She transformed herself." Later, after the guests had left, Oakley found me in the nursery. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For teaching me what really matters." She laughed softly. "Who would have thought I'd end up defending family quilting traditions?" I hugged her carefully around her belly. Sometimes the best patterns emerge from the most unexpected pieces. "Speaking of patterns," she said, "the baby kicked all through your demonstration. I think we might have another quilter in the family." Looking at the two quilts hanging side by side, their butterfly patterns catching the late afternoon light, I couldn't help but smile. Some lessons, it seemed, were already being passed down to the next generation. "Push, Oakley! You're almost there!" The delivery room buzzed with activity as my daughter-in-law gripped my hand with surprising strength. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can," I said firmly. "You're stronger than you think, just like when you mastered that butterfly stitch." She let out a laugh that turned into a groan. "Really? Quilting metaphors now?" "Focus on the pattern," I continued, wiping her forehead. "One stitch at a time, one push at a time." Henry stood on her other side, looking both terrified and amazed. "You're doing great, Oak." "One more big push," the doctor called. Moments later, the room filled with the strong cry of my grandson. I watched through tears as they placed him on Oakley's chest, perfect and pink and already reaching for the world. "He's beautiful," Henry whispered, kissing Oakley's forehead. "Like a butterfly emerging," she said softly, then looked up at me with a tired smile. "See? I can do quilting metaphors too." The nurse approached with a blanket, but Oakley shook her head. "Wait, Mom?" She hadn't called me that before. "Could you get the quilt from my bag?" I retrieved the quilt I'd made, the one she'd once mocked, now treasured. As we wrapped her son in it, I saw Oakley trace the butterfly pattern with a gentle finger. "Welcome to the family, James," she whispered. "You're already wrapped in its history." Later, in the private room, visitors began arriving. Amanda appeared first, clutching an expensive-looking gift bag. "Oh my God, is that the quilt?" she asked, her voice dripping with forced enthusiasm. "How rustic chic." "Actually," Oakley said, her voice stronger than I expected, "it's priceless, unlike some things that can be ordered online with next-day delivery." Amanda's face reddened. "I should go. Congratulations." As she fled, Annalise entered, carrying a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "Perfect timing," she said. "I saw that dreadful woman leaving. Still smarting from the nursery reveal, I suspect." "Grandma Anna," Oakley brightened. "Come meet James." Annalise settled into the chair beside the bed, unwrapping her package to reveal a tiny quilted blanket. "I made this last week. His first butterfly pattern." "It's perfect," Oakley breathed. "Mom, look at the stitching." I examined the miniature quilt, noting how Annalise had adapted the pattern to the small size. Beautiful work. "Now he has 3 generations of butterflies watching over him," Henry said, surprising us all with his observation. A knock at the door revealed Cadence, carrying coffee and a knowing smile. "How's our little quilter in training?" "Already wrapped in tradition," I said, watching James sleep peacefully in his quilt. "Speaking of tradition," Oakley said, shifting slightly in bed, "I've been thinking, maybe we could start a new one? Teaching quilting to anyone who wants to learn, not just family?" Annalise raised an eyebrow. "What brought this on?" After the nursery reveal, several of my friends asked about real quilting lessons, not for social media, but because they saw how meaningful it could be. Oakley looked at me hopefully. "Would you teach them? We could use my social media platform for good this time." I thought about how this had all started, with hurt feelings and plans for revenge, and how it had transformed into something so much more meaningful. "I'd love to," I said, "but only if you assist. You've gotten quite good with that butterfly pattern." "Deal." Oakley beamed, then yawned widely. Time for everyone to go, the nurse announced, poking her head in. Mother and baby need rest. As the others filed out, Oakley caught my hand. Stay? Just for a minute? I sat beside her bed, watching her watch her son. I was so wrong, she said quietly, about everything. The quilt, tradition, you. I was trying so hard to be something I thought mattered that I almost missed what actually does. The important thing is that you figured it out. Thanks to you, she smiled sleepily. Even if your methods were a bit calculated. I laughed softly. You knew? About using Annalise to teach me a lesson? I figured it out eventually. It was pretty brilliant, actually. I'm sorry if... Don't be. I needed that wake-up call. She touched the quilt wrapped around James. And now my son will grow up knowing what really matters. As I left the hospital room, I passed the nursery window. Through the glass, I could see rows of newborns, most wrapped in identical hospital blankets. But there was one, easy to spot, wrapped in a quilt with butterflies dancing across it, a symbol of transformation in more ways than one. My phone buzzed with a message from Oakley. First quilting class scheduled for next month. Hope you're ready for some students. I smiled, thinking how revenge had transformed into redemption, one stitch at a time. And that's how you make the final stitch in the butterfly pattern, I demonstrated to the eager group gathered in my craft room. Remember, it's not about perfection, it's about intention. Oakley adjusted baby James in his sling while supervising Amanda's wobbly attempt at the pattern. Loosen your grip a bit, you're strangling the needle. This is harder than it looks, Amanda admitted, her designer bracelets jingling as she worked. How did you learn so quickly? Practice, and a very patient teacher. Oakley caught my eye and smiled. The room buzzed with activity. 12 women from Oakley's social circle, all working on their first quilts. Even Annalise sat in the corner, offering occasional wisdom and frequent commentary. Look! One of the women held up her square. I did it! Beautiful work, Sarah, I said, examining her stitches. You're getting the hang of it. The doorbell rang, and Henry entered carrying takeout bags. Dinner for the quilting circle. My hero, Oakley said, kissing him as he took James from her sling. How was work? Better than yesterday. Dad's old clients are finally coming around. I watched them together, marveling at how much had changed. Henry seemed more grounded now, prouder of his family's heritage rather than trying to fit into Oakley's world. Ariel, Amanda called, holding up her practice piece. Is this right? I walked over to examine her work. The stitches were uneven, but the butterfly pattern was unmistakable. You're improving. How does it feel? Honestly? She lowered her voice. I haven't posted on social media in 2 weeks. This feels more real somehow. Speaking of real, Oakley announced, I have something to show everyone. She disappeared into the hallway and returned with a quilt I'd never seen before. The butterfly pattern flowed across it in shades of green and blue, each stitch careful and precise. I finished it last night, she said, suddenly shy. It's for James's first birthday next month. The room fell silent as everyone admired her work. I touched the fabric, noting the perfect tension in each stitch, the careful attention to detail. You've done it, I whispered. You've really done it. I had a good teacher, she paused. Actually, I had something else I wanted to say. Oakley turned to address the room. When I first married into this family, I thought success meant having the right clothes, the right friends, the right social media presence. I mocked things that seemed old-fashioned or simple. She touched her quilt gently. I was wrong. Amanda shifted uncomfortably in her chair. But this, what we're doing here, it's not about Instagram posts or impressing people. It's about creating something real, something that lasts. Each of these quilts will tell a story long after our social media accounts are forgotten. Well said, Annalise called from her corner. Now, who needs help with their butterfly wings? As the lesson continued, I stepped into the kitchen for a moment alone. Henry followed me, James sleeping peacefully in his arms. You know, he said, I never thanked you. For what? For not giving up on her, for finding a way to teach her without breaking her. I watched through the doorway as Oakley patiently showed Amanda how to correct a mistake. She taught me something too. Oh? That revenge isn't always about getting even. Sometimes it's about giving someone the chance to become better. James stirred in his sleep, his tiny fist clutching the edge of his quilted blanket. Through the kitchen window, I could see butterflies in my garden, dancing between the flowers. "Mom," Oakley called, "we need your expertise. Sarah's created some sort of new knot that none of us can figure out." I laughed, heading back to the craft room. "Coming!" The room was warm with conversation and friendship, needles flashing in the afternoon light. Amanda was helping another woman with her stitches. Annalise was telling stories about her quilting circle from the 60s. And there was Oakley, my once adversary turned daughter-in-law, teaching with patience and pride. "You know what?" Oakley said as I joined her. "I think we should display everyone's first butterfly squares at James's birthday party. Show the whole journey. Even the messy ones? Especially the messy ones. They're the most honest part of the story." I looked around at these women, each working on their own butterfly pattern, each on their own journey of transformation. My plan for revenge had created something far more valuable than satisfaction. It had built bridges, formed connections, and woven a new pattern of understanding. "Perfect," I said, picking up my needle to help Sarah with her knot. After all, every butterfly has to struggle a bit before it can fly.
My name is Jody, a 32-year-old lawyer with a life that, from the outside, seems like a fairy tale. I come from a family that's pretty well off, and I've known Ethan, the guy I'm supposed to marry, since we were kids. Our dads are old buddies who used to joke about us tying the knot one day. I remember one summer evening, during one of our family's joint dinners, our fathers brought up the topic again. I was about 10, and Ethan was 13. Ethan's dad, Mr. Thompson, laughed heartily and said, "Mark my words, Ethan, one day you'll marry Jody here, and our companies will be stronger for it." My dad joined in, chuckling, "Absolutely, John. These two will unite our legacies." I remember blushing furiously. Ethan just rolled his eyes and mumbled, as if I'd ever marry a kid. Back then, I was head over heels for Ethan. But he always saw me as the annoying little girl who followed him around. Despite his attitude, I couldn't help but nurture a small hope that one day, he'd see me differently. Years passed, and we both pursued our own paths. I dived into law, and Ethan became a hotshot financier in his father's company. Our paths rarely crossed, but I always kept tabs on him, my childhood crush never really fading away. During college, our families met less frequently, but the marriage joke continued. At a Thanksgiving dinner when I was 22, Mr. Thompson nudged Ethan and said, "So, Ethan, when are you going to make an honest woman out of Jody?" Ethan, who had had a bit too much to drink, replied loudly, "Fine. If Jody isn't married by 32, and I'm still single, I'll marry her. Happy now?" Everyone laughed, but I felt a strange mix of hope and embarrassment. The thought that Ethan might one day be my husband lingered in my mind like a stubborn perfume. I dated a bit after that, but nothing serious. Part of me always compared every guy to Ethan, and they all fell short. As for Ethan, he was seen with various women over the years, never settling down. I remember the day Ethan proposed like it was yesterday. It was a typical Tuesday evening, and I had just returned from a long day at the law firm. I was exhausted, my mind still buzzing with the day's cases, when I found Ethan waiting for me at my apartment. "Hey, Jody." He greeted me casually, as if it was normal for him to be there. "Ethan? What are you doing here?" I asked, surprised. He shrugged. "Thought I'd drop by. We need to talk." My heart raced. "We need to talk," those words never meant anything good in my experience. "Sure, let's talk. Is everything all right?" I tried to sound calm, but my voice betrayed a hint of nervousness. Ethan took a deep breath. "Look, you know the promise I made years ago? About marrying you if we're both still single at 32. "Yeah," I replied, a lump forming in my throat. I wasn't sure where this was going. "Well, I'm a man of my word. So, here." He pulled out a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple, yet elegant ring. "Will you marry me, Jody?" I was stunned. This wasn't the proposal I had dreamed of, but it was Ethan, and that was all that mattered. "Yes, Ethan, I will," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He slid the ring onto my finger, and that was it. No hug, no kiss, just a nod from him. "We should tell our parents. They'll be thrilled," he said, already reaching for his phone. I nodded, still processing what had just happened. This was it. I was going to marry Ethan. The next few days were a whirlwind. Our families met for dinner to celebrate the engagement. "Ethan, I can't tell you how happy this makes me," Mr. Thompson said, clapping Ethan on the back. "Yeah, it's great," Ethan replied, his tone flat. My dad raised his glass. "To Jody and Ethan, may this union bring happiness and prosperity to both our families." "To Jody and Ethan," everyone echoed. The dinner was filled with laughter and plans for the future. Everyone was excited, talking about the wedding and how perfect it was for the two families to unite at last. But as I sat there, listening to them, I couldn't help but feel like a bystander in my own life. This was everything I had ever wanted, so why did it feel so hollow? But then, another part of me argued that this was Ethan, the man I had loved all my life. Maybe, with time, he would come to love me. "Give it a chance, Jody," I whispered to myself. "Maybe this is the start of something wonderful." I closed my eyes, trying to convince myself that everything would be all right. That this marriage, this union of two families, would somehow turn into the love story I had always dreamed of. The civil ceremony was a quiet affair, just our immediate families and a few close friends. Ethan's dad, Mr. Thompson, got teary-eyed as we exchanged vows. "Never thought I'd see the day," he said, wiping his eyes. My parents were beaming, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel a bit of happiness. After the civil ceremony, the real challenge began, planning the grand wedding. We decided on a 2-month timeline, which meant I had my work cut out for me. I dove into the preparations headfirst, hoping it would distract me from my doubts. One evening, I was sitting with a mountain of bridal magazines, trying to pick a theme for the wedding. Ethan walked in, late from work as usual. "Hey," I said, looking up. "What do you think about a vintage theme for the wedding?" Ethan glanced at the magazines and then at me. "Whatever you want, Jody. It's your day." I felt a twinge of disappointment at his indifference. "But it's our day," I protested softly. He sighed. "I'm beat, Jody. Just pick whatever you like. I'm sure it'll be great." He then walked away, leaving me alone with my magazines. I shook off the feeling of rejection and continued with the plans. Dress shopping was next on my list. I invited my mom and Ethan's mom, Mrs. Thompson, to join me. At the bridal shop, I tried on dress after dress, but nothing felt right. My mom was getting impatient. "Jody, they all look beautiful. Just pick one." Mrs. Thompson was more understanding. "Take your time, dear. It's a big decision." Finally, I found the perfect dress. It was elegant and simple, just what I had always imagined. "This is the one," I said, looking at myself in the mirror. Both moms agreed, and we celebrated with a small lunch. Mrs. Thompson brought up the topic of Ethan. "He's always been a bit reserved. Don't take it to heart, dear." I nodded, but her words didn't provide much comfort. The weeks flew by, and the wedding day was fast approaching. I was in the midst of choosing cakes and finalizing the guest list when I realized I hadn't seen much of Ethan. He was always at work or too tired to discuss anything when he was home. As the wedding day neared, I felt more like a wedding planner than a bride. My excitement was replaced by a sense of loneliness and a growing realization that maybe this marriage was more about convenience than love. But I pushed those thoughts aside. I had to focus on the wedding. Maybe, after the wedding, things would change. Maybe Ethan would be different. The day my world came crashing down started like any other. I was at work, buried under a mountain of case files, when a sudden wave of nausea hit me. I hadn't been feeling well all morning, so I decided to head home early. I pulled up to our house, noticing Ethan's car in the driveway. That was odd, he was never home this early. Quietly, I unlocked the front door, not wanting to startle him. Maybe he was sick too, I thought. As I stepped inside, I heard Ethan's voice coming from the living room. He was on the phone. Curiosity got the better of me, and I tiptoed closer. "No, baby, I can't wait to see you tonight," Ethan said, his voice soft and affectionate. My heart skipped a beat. Who was he talking to? I pressed myself against the wall, listening intently. "Yeah, marrying Jody is a pain, but it's worth it. Once I get control of the companies, we'll be set. Don't worry, after she pops out a kid, I'll dump her," he continued. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This couldn't be happening. The room spun around me as I struggled to process his words. "Yeah, she's clueless. Thinks I actually love her," he chuckled. That chuckle, so cold and cruel, shattered the last bit of hope I had. I couldn't listen anymore. I stumbled back to the front door, my mind racing. I needed to get out of there, to breathe. As I slammed the door shut behind me, I heard Ethan call out, "Jody, is that you?" I didn't look back. I got into my car and drove. I didn't know where I was going, I just needed to be away from that house, away from Ethan. I ended up at a park, sitting on a bench, watching families and couples around me, oblivious to my world falling apart. How could I have been so blind? How could I not see what Ethan really was? I had to make a decision. Confronting Ethan was the obvious choice, but what then? Cause a scene, break off the engagement, and be the talk of our families and friends? Or play along, keep my dignity, and figure out what to do next? As the sun set, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to let Ethan see how much he had hurt me. I would play his game, for now, but on my terms. I had to be smart about this. I drove home, my face a mask of calm. Ethan was waiting for me, a concerned look on his face. "Where were you?" "I was worried," he said, coming towards me. "I wasn't feeling well, just needed some fresh air," I lied smoothly. He nodded. "Okay, well, I'm here now. Let's have dinner." I forced a smile. "Sure, that sounds great." As we sat eating, I looked at Ethan, really looked at him. This was the man I had loved my whole life, and now, he was nothing but a stranger to me. That night, as Ethan slept beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing with plans and possibilities. One thing was clear, I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. Ethan had no idea who he was dealing with. Lying next to Ethan that night, I couldn't shake off the mix of anger and betrayal boiling inside me. I needed to know more, to understand the extent of his deceit. Quietly, I reached for his phone on the nightstand. My hands were trembling as I unlocked it, thank goodness for easy-to-guess passwords. I opened his messages and there it was, a string of texts with someone named Julia. My heart raced as I scrolled through their conversations. They were planning to meet the night before our wedding, in our house. An extreme date, in the presence of a sleeping wife, is exactly what they called their plan. So that I wouldn't disturb them, they planned to give me strong sleeping pills. The audacity of it made my blood boil. "Ethan, you bastard," I muttered under my breath. I heard him stir and quickly place the phone back, pretending to be asleep. My mind was racing with thoughts of revenge. I couldn't let them get away with this. I needed a plan, something to turn the tables on Ethan and his mistress. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. Ethan was his usual self, indifferent and preoccupied with work. I kissed him goodbye and watched him leave for the office. Once he was gone, I sat down with a cup of coffee, thinking about my next move. I decided to reach out to an old friend from law school, Mike. He was now a private investigator and could be the key to gathering the evidence I needed against Ethan. I met Mike at a small cafe downtown. He looked concerned when I told him about Ethan's betrayal. "Jody, I'm so sorry. What do you need me to do?" he asked. "I need evidence, Mike. Photos, texts, anything that can prove what he's up to," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Mike nodded. "Consider it done. I'll get you everything you need." "Thank you, Mike. I can't let him get away with this," I replied, feeling a sense of empowerment for the first time since I heard Ethan's conversation. That evening, Ethan came home late again. We sat down for dinner, the tension between us palpable. "Is everything okay, Jody? You seem distant," Ethan said, his eyes not meeting mine. I forced a smile, just tired from wedding planning. "You know how it is." He nodded. "Yeah, I guess. Listen, I'll be working late tomorrow night. Don't wait up for me." I felt a flash of anger but kept my composure. "Sure, no problem. Work comes first, right?" He didn't detect the sarcasm in my voice. "Exactly. Glad you understand." As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but think about how blind I had been. Ethan never loved me. It was all a lie, a means to an end for him. But I wasn't going to be a pawn in his game any longer. I had Mike gathering evidence, and soon I'd have enough to expose Ethan for the fraud he was. But that wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel the humiliation and betrayal I felt. I started planning the ultimate revenge in my mind, a way to turn the tables and leave Ethan with nothing. He thought he was playing me, but he had no idea what was coming for him. The eve of our wedding arrived with a heavy air of anticipation. Ethan seemed more on edge than usual, but I pretended not to notice. I was too focused on my plan, the final act of this tragic play. Ethan came home early, which was unusual. He was carrying a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "Thought we could celebrate our last night as an unmarried couple," he said with a forced smile. I played along, hiding my contempt. "That sounds lovely," I replied, mustering a smile. As he poured the champagne, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment he'd try to drug me, as per his plan with Julia. We clinked glasses, and I brought the champagne to my lips, pretending to sip while actually letting it run down the side of my mouth. Ethan didn't notice, he was too busy texting under the table. Probably Julia, I thought bitterly. After a few minutes, I feigned dizziness. "Ethan, I'm not feeling so well. I think I need to lie down." He looked up, satisfaction flashing in his eyes for a moment. "Oh, okay. Do you need any help?" "No, I'll be fine. Just need some rest," I said, standing up shakily. As I made my way to the bedroom, I heard Ethan make a phone call. "She's out. You can come over now," he whispered. My heart raced. This was it. My plan was about to unfold. Once in the bedroom, I quietly locked the door and slipped under the covers, pretending to be asleep. I heard the front door open and close a while later, and then low voices coming from the living room. Ethan and Julia, no doubt. I waited for what felt like hours, my body tense with anticipation. Then, I made my move. I grabbed my phone and called both our parents, whispering a quick lie about a surprise for them at the house. "Mom, Dad, you need to come over right now. I have a surprise for Ethan and I want you to be part of it," I said, my voice trembling with feigned excitement. "Really, honey? At this hour?" "Okay, we'll be right there," my mom replied, confused but intrigued. I made the same call to Ethan's parents, ensuring that everyone would arrive at the same time. Then, I sat in the dark, waiting for the moment of truth. The sound of the doorbell broke the silence of the night. I heard footsteps and then voices of confusion and anger. I slipped out of bed and made my way to the living room. The scene before me was one of chaos. Ethan and Julia, caught in a compromising position, our parents standing in the doorway, shocked and appalled. "What the hell is this, Ethan?" Mr. Thompson roared, his face red with anger. Ethan was speechless, his eyes wide with shock. Julia was scrambling to cover herself, looking around frantically. I stepped into the room, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. "Surprise," I said, my voice cold. The confrontation was intense. Accusations flew, tears were shed, and the truth came out in the ugliest way. Ethan tried to explain, but his words fell on deaf ears. As the reality of the situation sank in, I felt a strange sense of relief. The charade was over. I was free from the lies and deceit. I watched as Ethan's world crumbled around him. He had lost everything in one fell swoop, his family, his reputation, and any future he might have had with me. The aftermath of Ethan's betrayal left the house in a haunting silence. As I sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the cold coffee before me, my mind was a battleground of emotions. The dramatic revelation had left me reeling, but also ignited a flame of determination within. I spent the next few days in a flurry of activity. Meetings with my lawyer, going over the evidence Mike, the private detective, had gathered. The photos of Ethan with Julia, their intimate texts, and the damning correspondence where they planned to drug me with a powerful sleeping pill, it was all there. Ethan attempted to reach out several times, but I ignored his calls and messages. There was nothing left to say to him. On the day of the court hearing, I donned my sharpest suit, a symbol of the new, unyielding woman I had become. Walking into the courtroom, I saw Ethan, a shell of the confident man he once was. The hearing was intense. My lawyer presented the evidence with clinical precision. Ethan's lawyer tried to defend, but the proof was irrefutable. After the hearing, Ethan approached me, a look of desperation in his eyes. "Jody, please, can we talk?" he implored. I faced him, the man who had shattered my trust. "What's left to say, Ethan?" My voice was calm but laced with disdain. I'm sorry, Jody. I never thought it would go this far," he stammered. "Sorry isn't good enough." "You made your choices, Ethan," I replied, turning my back on him. Over the following months, the legal battle raged on, but my resolve never wavered. The evidence was damning, and eventually, justice was served. Ethan was ordered to pay a significant sum for emotional damages. Leaving the courtroom for the last time, a wave of relief washed over me. I had stood up to Ethan and emerged victorious. That chapter of my life was closed. I was ready to move forward, stronger and more resilient. Ethan was now a part of my past, a difficult chapter, but one that had taught me the strength I possessed. Walking out of the courthouse, the final gavel still ringing in my ears, marked more than just a legal victory. It was the end of a chapter, a painful saga that had changed me in ways I never imagined. As I stepped into the sunlight, a sense of liberation enveloped me, the chains of my past finally broken. I didn't head home immediately. Instead, I found solace in a quaint park, a place that once held memories of Ethan and me. Now, it symbolized a fresh start. Sitting on an old bench, basking in the warmth of the sun, I pondered over the recent events. My phone vibrated with a message from my friend Lisa. "You're a rock star, Jody. Ready to celebrate your freedom?" I smiled, replying, "Absolutely. Just need a moment to myself first." "Take your time, girl. We'll party when you're up for it," she responded. As I sat there, lost in thought, I was approached by an elderly woman. "You're Jody, right?" I was in the courtroom. "What you did, standing up for yourself, was incredibly brave," she said softly. Her words touched a deep chord within me. "Thank you. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary," I replied, feeling a swell of pride. "You've inspired me, dear," she said before walking away, leaving me with a sense of purpose and strength. That evening, a small celebration with close friends marked the beginning of a new era. Laughter and cheers filled the air as we toasted to new beginnings. The next day brought an unexpected turn. While out for a walk, I received a call from Ethan. His voice was desperate, a stark contrast to the confident man I once knew. Jody, please, I need your help, he pleaded. What's wrong, Ethan? I asked, although I had a guess. My father, after everything that came out, he's considering kicking me out of the company and disinheriting me. You have to talk to him, convince him not to. Ethan's voice cracked with desperation. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Karma had caught up with him. Ethan, what you're asking? I can't do that. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences, I said calmly. But Jody, I have nothing left. Please, I'm begging you, he implored. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of empowerment. No, Ethan. It's time for you to face the music. Goodbye. I hung up, cutting off any further pleas. Walking back home, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Ethan's downfall was a result of his own actions, and I no longer bore any responsibility for his fate. In the following weeks, I threw myself into work and rekindled old hobbies. Friends and family surrounded me, their support unwavering. Life was moving forward, and so was I. One evening, as I relaxed with a book, a realization dawned on me: I was content. The turmoil of the past had given way to peace, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. The journey had been tumultuous, filled with betrayal and heartache, but it had also taught me resilience and self-worth. I had stood up for myself, sought justice, and emerged stronger. I've always found solace in the quiet aisles of bookstores, the kind where time seems to have its own rhythm and stories leap from tattered pages. At 29, running a business that my parents helped me set up, I often escaped to these havens, seeking the company of books over people. That day at Dusty Pages, a little haven tucked away in the city's heart, was no different. Or so I thought. As I wandered through the maze of shelves, my fingers traced the spines of countless books, each holding a universe within. My quest was specific, a rare, antique edition that had eluded me for months. And there it was, almost glowing amidst the dust and shadows. As I reached out, another hand mirrored mine, halting inches from the prize. Startled, I looked up into a pair of curious eyes. The owner of the hand was a man about my age, with a kind of easygoing charm. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said, quickly retracting his hand. "Were you going for this one?" "Yeah, I've been on its trail for ages," I replied, surprised at my own honesty. He gave a half-smile, "Me too. It's a tough find. But go ahead, you found it first." His gesture, so simple yet rare, caught me off guard. "Are you sure?" "I mean, we both found it at the same time," I said, feeling a strange mix of guilt and gratitude. "Yeah, I'm sure. I'm Jake, by the way," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Nice to meet you, Jake." "I am, well, let's just say I'm a fellow book lover," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, friendly. We both chuckled, and I took the book, feeling a twinge of victory mixed with sympathy. "You're a rare breed, Jake. Giving up a find like this." He shrugged. "Books come and go. But it's not every day you get to make someone's day." I laughed. "Well, you've certainly made mine. I'm in this place often, but I haven't seen you around." "You a regular?" "Nah, first time here. I usually stick to the tech world, but there's something about old books, you know?" I nodded, understanding all too well. We found a corner table amidst the stacks and started talking about books, life, and everything in between. He was easy to talk to, a listener with stories of his own. He was curious about my business, but I dodged the topic, not ready to delve into the whole successful businesswoman with family support narrative just yet. Hours slipped by like minutes as we talked. I learned about his tech job, his love for hiking, and his surprisingly good taste in old movies. In turn, I shared my love for antique books, my random adventures, and my guilty pleasure of bad reality TV shows. As the bookstore began to dim its lights, signaling closing time, we exchanged numbers. "It was really great meeting you, Jake. Maybe we can do this again," talk more about books, or anything else? I said, feeling a connection I hadn't anticipated. Absolutely, he replied, his smile genuine. I'll hold you to that. And maybe next time, I'll find the book first. After several months of dating Jake, the inevitable happened, meeting his family. He'd warned me about them, how they were a bit, well, let's just say they had their quirks. He was especially worried about them finding out about my business and the money situation. So, I decided to play it down, saying I was a freelancer. Just a simple girl writing articles, nothing fancy. We drove to his parents' house one Sunday. It was a modest home, the kind that had seen better days. The moment we walked in, I felt the weight of their eyes sizing me up. Mom, Dad, this is... Jake started. I'm Sarah, I cut in, offering a smile that felt more like a shield. His mom, a stern-looking woman with a permanent frown, gave me a once-over. Sarah, huh? And what is it you do? I'm a freelance writer. I write articles for websites, I replied, trying to sound as humble as possible. His dad, a quiet man with a knack for disappearing into the background, just nodded. But it was Jake's sister, Linda, who spoke next. A freelancer? So, you don't have a real job? Linda's voice dripped with a mix of curiosity and disdain. I felt Jake's hand tighten around mine, a silent plea for patience. Well, it pays the bills. It's honest work, I said, keeping my tone light. Linda snorted. Sounds more like freeloading to me. Bet you're just waiting to latch onto Jake's income. Dinner was an awkward affair. His parents made small talk, asking Jake about his work, barely acknowledging my presence. Linda, on the other hand, was like a dog with a bone, dropping snide remarks every chance she got. So, Sarah, freelancing must be tough. Bet you don't get to go on fancy trips or buy nice things, Linda said, her eyes sharp. I forced a laugh. Oh, I manage. I like simple things. Jake tried to change the subject, talking about a recent project he was working on. But Linda wouldn't let up. And what about kids? Planning on any? Or would that be too much for a freelancer to handle? She pressed on. I could feel Jake's frustration growing, mirroring my own. We haven't really thought that far ahead, he said, his voice tight. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of uncomfortable exchanges and forced smiles. Things started heating up after that awkward dinner with Jake's family. It wasn't long before his mom and sister, Linda, began dropping by our place uninvited. They'd come in, plop themselves on the couch, and make themselves right at home, often staying for hours. It was like they were marking their territory, reminding me that I was the outsider. One such afternoon, while Jake was at work, his mom and Linda showed up. As usual, they made a beeline for the kitchen, expecting to be fed. I had just made some sandwiches for myself, which they took as an invitation to lunch. So, Sarah, still freelancing? Linda asked, taking a bite of the sandwich I had made for myself. I nodded, trying to keep my cool. Yep, still at it. It's going well. And how much does that bring in, if you don't mind me asking? His mom chimed in, her eyes scanning my modest living room like she was calculating my worth. I shrugged, enough to get by. I don't really discuss my finances. Linda smirked, must be nice, living off Jake while pretending to work. I clenched my jaw, feeling my patience wearing thin. Actually, I pay my own bills. Jake and I keep our finances separate. Their prying continued, but I dodged their questions, keeping my answers vague. They seemed to take pleasure in trying to undermine me, questioning my lifestyle, my job, even my relationship with Jake. Then came the family dinner at Jake's mom's place. It was supposed to be a casual get-together, but it felt more like a trial by fire. We all sat around the dining table, the air thick with unspoken tensions. Linda, who had been oddly quiet, suddenly turned to Jake. So, brother, I was thinking, for my son's birthday, you could get him that gaming console he's been wanting. It's a bit pricey, but you can afford it, right? Jake, who had been picking at his food, looked up, surprised. Linda, you know I can't do that. Things are tight right now, what with the wedding and all. Linda's face turned sour. Oh, so now that you're married, you suddenly can't spare a dime for your nephew? Jake's frustration was evident. It's not about that, Linda. Sarah and I have our own expenses. I can't just splurge on expensive gifts. The argument escalated, with Linda accusing me of monopolizing Jake's finances and attention. You've changed, Jake. Ever since she came into your life, you've been stingy and distant. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, the unspoken blame hanging heavy in the air. Jake tried to defend me, but Linda wouldn't have it. She stormed out, leaving a trail of tension behind. After the blow-up at the family dinner, Jake and I decided we needed a break from all the drama. We planned a short trip to the mountains, a chance to clear our heads and get some breathing room. It was a peaceful, rejuvenating escape, just the two of us and nature. But the moment we returned, reality crashed back in, harder than ever. We barely had time to unpack when there was a furious knocking at our door. I opened it to find Linda, red-faced and fuming. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me into the apartment. What's going on, Linda? Why are you here? I asked, closing the door. She whirled around, eyes blazing. Don't play dumb, Sarah. I know what you're doing. You're bleeding Jake dry, using his money to go on fancy trips and buy expensive stuff. And now you're turning him against his own family. I was taken aback by her accusation. Linda, that's not true. We both pay for our expenses, and this trip was planned long ago. She wasn't listening, though. You think you're so clever, huh? Making him think he doesn't need us, that we're just after his money. But I see right through you. Jake came out of the bedroom, having heard the commotion. Linda, what the hell? You can't just barge in here and start accusing Sarah of nonsense. She rounded on him. Nonsense? Look at you, Jake. Ever since she came into your life, you've been different. You used to help us, be there for us. Now you're just her puppet. Jake's patience was wearing thin. Linda, I'm not anyone's puppet. Sarah and I make our decisions together. And as for helping you, I can't keep bailing you out every time you have a financial problem. Linda's anger seemed to boil over. In a fit of rage, she swept her arm across the coffee table, sending my collection of antique books crashing to the floor. This is what you care about now? Old, useless books and a gold digger? I gasped, rushing to salvage my books. Jake grabbed Linda's arm, steering her towards the door. That's enough, Linda. Leave. Now. She struggled against him. You'll regret this, Jake. Choosing her over your own family. After she left, the apartment was eerily silent, the tension hanging thick in the air. Jake helped me pick up the books, his face a mix of anger and regret. The weeks following Linda's outburst were quiet, almost nearly so. Jake and I had started to relax a bit, thinking maybe, just maybe, his family had decided to back off. That was until we got the call from his mom about her birthday dinner at a fancy restaurant downtown. When Jake mentioned that his mother's birthday dinner would be at Le Jardin, I couldn't help but grin. I had a special connection with that place, a little secret that I hadn't shared with anyone, not even Jake. As we drove to the restaurant, I could sense Jake's anxiety. He fidgeted in his seat, clearly worried about how the evening would unfold after the recent tensions with his family. You okay? I asked, reaching over to give his hand a reassuring squeeze. Yeah, just hoping tonight goes smoothly, he replied, forcing a smile. Le Jardin was as elegant as ever, with its dim lighting and soft music creating an intimate ambience. Jake's family was already there, seated at a large, round table. The scene was lively, with animated conversations and laughter, but it all seemed to pause as we approached. I quickly noticed there was only one empty chair. Jake, with a hint of confusion in his voice, addressed his sister, Linda. "Hey, Linda, why is there only one seat? We're both here." Linda, with a smirk that didn't quite reach her eyes, said, "Oh, Jake, we assumed Sarah wouldn't mind. After all, this is a family gathering, and she's not really family, is she? Maybe she can find a spot at the bar." The table erupted in a mix of awkward chuckles and murmurs. Jake's face turned a shade of red, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. I felt their eyes on me, expecting me to react, to show some sign of hurt or outrage. But instead, I laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh. "That's quite all right, Linda. I wouldn't want to impose." Jake, still holding my hand, looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Sarah, you sure you're okay with this?" I squeezed his hand. "Absolutely. Don't worry about me. I'll find a place. Enjoy the dinner." As I stepped away from the table, I could feel their eyes on me, a mix of surprise and uncertainty in their gaze. I approached the restaurant manager, a familiar face, with a confident stride. "Hi, John, seems there's a bit of a mix-up at our table. Could you find a spot for me?" I asked, my tone light but firm. John's professional demeanor broke into a smile of recognition. "Of course, Sarah. For the owner of Le Jardin, we always have the best table available." The words were loud enough for Jake's family to hear, and I glanced back to see their expressions shift from smug satisfaction to utter shock. Linda's and her mother's mouths hung open, their plan to belittle me backfiring spectacularly. As John led me to a beautifully set table in a prime location, I couldn't help but savor the moment. The irony of the situation was delicious, and their stunned faces were a sight to behold. Sitting at my own VIP table at Le Jardin, I couldn't help but feel a mix of triumph and amusement. Jake sat across from me, his expression still a mix of shock and pride. "Sarah, why didn't you tell me you own this place?" he asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. I shrugged, sipping my wine. I guess I never found the right moment. And, honestly, I wanted to keep some parts of my life just for me, at least for a little while. He laughed, shaking his head. "This is incredible. No wonder you weren't fazed by Linda's comment." Our meal was delightful, the food exquisite as always, but the real entertainment was the drama unfolding at the family table. Midway through our dinner, Linda and Jake's mom, with hesitant steps and awkward expressions, approached our table. "Sarah, we didn't know," Jake's mom stammered, clearly struggling to find the right words. "Yeah, about the restaurant, and you owning it," Linda added, her usual confidence deflated. I put down my fork, giving them a calm look. "It's okay. Not many people do. I prefer to keep my business affairs private." Jake's mom fidgeted, glancing at the other table where the rest of the family was pretending not to eavesdrop. I mean, about the bill tonight. We assumed you'd." I raised an eyebrow. "You assumed I'd pay because I own the place?" They both nodded, visibly uncomfortable. I could tell they were expecting me to bail them out of the awkward situation they had created for themselves. I leaned back in my chair, choosing my words carefully. "Well, as much as I'd love to treat everyone, I think it's important for us to stick to what was planned. It seems, someone said that I'm not a family member, right?" The look on their faces was a mix of surprise and embarrassment. Linda, usually so quick to speak, was at a loss for words. They returned to their table, their departure marked by a few curious glances from the other guests. Turning back to our meal, Jake let out a low whistle. "Well, that was something." I laughed, the tension from earlier completely diffused. "Just a typical dinner with your family, huh?" He nodded, his eyes still on his family's table. "You know, I'm starting to think these dinners are cursed." We finished our meal in peace, the atmosphere at our table starkly contrasting with the palpable tension at the family table. As we left the restaurant, I felt a sense of closure, like I had finally established my place in this complicated family dynamic. Their attempts to belittle me had backfired, and in revealing a part of my life I had kept private, I had gained an unexpected upper hand. The ride home from Blue Jardin was filled with a mix of silence and soft music playing in the background. Jake seemed deep in thought, occasionally glancing at me as if he was about to say something but then deciding against it. Finally, as we pulled into our driveway, he spoke up. "Sarah, I'm really sorry about tonight. My family, they can be too much." I turned off the car's engine and looked at him. "Jake, it's not your fault. But we do need to talk about this." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I know. What do you think we should do?" I took a moment before answering. "I think it's time we set some boundaries. Your family's behavior has been out of line, and tonight was it was too much." Jake nodded, his expression grave. "I agree. I just never expected things to get this bad. Linda and Mom, they've always been difficult, but this..." "It's not just about Linda and your mom," I interjected. "It's about respecting our relationship, our choices. They can't keep treating me, like this." Jake reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "You're right. I'll talk to them. It's time they understand that they can't walk all over us." The following day, Jake made the call. I could hear bits and pieces of the conversation from the other room. His tone was firm, resolute. After he hung up, he came into the living room, looking somewhat relieved but also apprehensive. "I did it. I told them we need space, that their behavior is unacceptable. They didn't take it well, but I think it's for the best." I got up and gave him a hug. "Thank you, Jake. I know that wasn't easy." He hugged me back, tight. "You're worth it. I should have done this a long time ago." The weeks that followed were surprisingly peaceful. No unexpected visits, no snide remarks, no drama. It was a relief, but also a bit surreal. One evening, as we were enjoying a quiet dinner at home, Jake looked up from his plate. "You know, I've been thinking. Maybe this break from my family is a good thing. Gives us time to focus on us, on what we want." I smiled, reaching across the table to hold his hand. "I've been thinking the same thing. It's nice, isn't it? Just being us, without all the noise." He nodded, a contented smile spreading across his face. "Yeah, it really is." Cutting ties with Jake's family wasn't an easy decision, but it brought a sense of clarity and peace to our lives. It was a step towards prioritizing our happiness and well-being, a step that was long overdue. Sitting on our living room couch, Jake and I were enjoying a quiet evening. The room was filled with the soft glow of the lamp and the faint sound of a jazz record playing in the background. I couldn't help but reflect on the roller coaster of events that had unfolded in our lives recently. "Jake," I started, breaking the comfortable silence, "do you ever think about how things would have been if we had I don't know, given in to your family's demands?" He looked over at me, his eyes thoughtful. "Sometimes, yeah, but then I remember how unhappy we were, constantly trying to please them. I think we made the right choice." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "It's just crazy, you know? How much we've been through because of all this. Makes me wonder what's really important in life." Jake reached out and took my hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "What's important is this, us, being honest with each other, standing up for what we believe in." I smiled, feeling a sense of warmth spreading through me. "You're right. I guess it's all about finding a balance, isn't it? Between dealing with family and staying true to ourselves." "Yeah, balance," he echoed, his gaze shifting to the window. "You know, before all this, I always thought family was about sticking together no matter what. But now, I realize it's more than that. It's about respect, understanding, and sometimes, distance." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "I never expected my life to turn out like this. Meeting you, starting a business, dealing with all the family drama. It's been a journey. And what a journey it's been, he added with a chuckle. With its ups and downs, but I wouldn't change a thing. We sat there in silence for a while, lost in our thoughts. The challenges we had faced with his family had tested us in ways we never anticipated. But through it all, we had grown stronger, both as individuals and as a couple. That evening, as we sat together, I realized that life is unpredictable and often challenging. But with the right person by your side, it's an adventure worth every moment. Our story wasn't just about dealing with difficult in-laws or running a successful business. It was about love, resilience, and the power of standing together against the odds. Life at 40 was exactly as I had meticulously planned it, a successful career as a department head, a comfortable home, and a shiny car in the driveway. Love and romance? Those were chapters one had skipped, focusing instead on my spreadsheets and meetings. Until one unassuming evening at my friend Lisa's party, where my well-ordered world took an unexpected turn. "Anna, you need to get out more," Lisa had insisted over the phone. "It'll be good for you." I had reluctantly agreed, not really expecting much from the evening. As I arrived at the party, the atmosphere was buzzing with laughter and chatter. I felt out of place, awkwardly holding a glass of wine, scanning the room for a familiar face. That's when I noticed him. He was in the middle of a lively group, but somehow seemed separate from them. There was an ease about him that caught my attention. He walked over to me, a confident yet friendly smile on his face. "Hi, I'm Tom," he said, offering his hand. "I don't think we've met before." "I'm Anna," I replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, reassuring. "First time at one of Lisa's infamous parties?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Is it that obvious?" I said, trying to match his light tone. "Just a lucky guess," Tom chuckled. "So, what brings you here tonight? Friend of the host?" "Yes, Lisa and I go way back. But parties aren't really my scene. I'm more the type to curl up with a good book at home," I admitted. A fellow book lover. What do you like to read?" Tom asked, leaning against the wall, completely engaged in our conversation. "Mysteries mostly. There's something about unraveling a puzzle that's relaxing after a day of work," I said, feeling a bit more at ease. "I get that. I'm more into biographies, though. Real-life stories have a certain appeal, don't you think?" Tom said. The conversation flowed effortlessly from there. We discussed everything from our favorite authors to our jobs. I learned he was a graphic designer, passionate about his work, and surprisingly, 5 years younger than me. His sense of humor was a breath of fresh air. As the night wore on, we somehow found ourselves tucked away in a quieter corner of the room, lost in conversation. It was uncanny how natural it felt to talk to him, as if we'd known each other for years rather than hours. When it was time to leave, Tom insisted on walking me to my car. "I hope I get to see you again, Anna," he said earnestly as we stood beside my car. "I think I'd like that," I found myself saying, surprised by my own willingness to step out of my comfort zone. "Good night, Tom." Driving home, my mind replayed our conversation, his laughter, the ease of the evening. It was unsettling yet exhilarating. For the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of something new, something unexpected. After that party, Tom and I started seeing each other more. It wasn't like anything I had experienced before. He was thoughtful in ways that caught me off guard. He'd surprise me with my favorite coffee at work or send me texts just to say he was thinking of me. One evening, he invited me over for dinner. I walked into his apartment to find he had cooked an entire meal. "I hope you're hungry," he said, grinning from ear to ear. "I'm impressed. I didn't know you could cook," I said, taking in the spread on the table. "There's a lot you don't know about me," he replied with a wink. "For instance, I make a mean lasagna." As we ate, he told me stories about his family, his dreams, his fears. It was intimate, real. After dinner, we settled on the couch, a comfortable silence enveloping us. "You know, Anna, I never thought I'd meet someone like you," Tom said, looking into my eyes. "Like me? How so?" I asked, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Someone who's not just about the surface stuff. You see the world differently. It's refreshing," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled, feeling a flutter in my stomach. Weeks turned into months, and our relationship deepened. Tom was charming, not just to me but to everyone around him. He even won over my parents when I introduced him. My mom, who was usually hard to please, said, "He's a keeper, that one." But the real turning point came 6 months into our relationship. It was a regular evening. We were walking in the park after dinner. "Anna, I've been thinking," Tom started, sounding serious for once. "I don't want to spend another day without you. Marry me." His proposal caught me off guard. "Tom, are you serious? We've only been together for 6 months." I know it's fast. But when something feels right, why wait?" he argued, his eyes searching mine for an answer. I looked at him, this man who had unexpectedly become my world. "Yes," I found myself saying, "yes, I'll marry you." Married life started like something out of a storybook. Tom and I were in our own little world, wrapped up in the bliss that comes with being newlyweds. In those first few months, Tom was incredibly attentive. He'd surprise me with little notes hidden around the house, each one making my day a little brighter. One evening, I found a note on the bathroom mirror. "Meet me in the backyard," it read. Curious, I made my way outside to find Tom had set up a makeshift projector. "Movie night under the stars," he announced proudly. I couldn't help but laugh. "You really go all out, don't you?" "Only the best for my wife," he replied with a wink. As we cuddled under a blanket watching an old classic, I remember thinking I had never been this happy. But it wasn't just the grand gestures. It was the small things too. How he'd make coffee just the way I liked it, or how we'd cook together, dancing around the kitchen to some old tune. One day, as we were making dinner, I playfully splashed him with water. "Hey, what was that for?" he exclaimed, pretending to be offended. "Just keeping you on your toes," I shot back, laughing. He came over, a mock stern look on his face. "You're going to pay for that," he said, before breaking into a smile and pulling me into a hug. Life with Tom felt easy, like everything had fallen into place. Even when we disagreed, it was never anything serious. We had this rhythm, this understanding between us that felt natural. But as perfect as everything seemed, there were moments that gave me pause. Like when Tom casually suggested that we should have a joint bank account for convenience. I remember frowning slightly at the idea. "Isn't it a bit soon for that? We're doing fine managing our finances separately." He shrugged, a carefree smile on his face. "It's just easier this way, isn't it? One less thing to worry about." I hesitated but eventually agreed. After all, we were married now. Sharing a bank account seemed like a logical step in our partnership. The shift was subtle at first. After we merged our bank accounts, I noticed small discrepancies in our finances. Tom started spending more, often on things that seemed extravagant. One evening, I decided to bring it up. We were sitting in the living room, bills scattered on the coffee table. "Tom, I've been noticing some large amounts coming out of our account lately. Fancy suits, high-end gadgets, it's a bit much, don't you think?" Tom looked up from his phone, seemingly unfazed. "Oh, that. Well, I need to look the part, don't I? You can't have your husband looking shabby." I frowned. "But we need to be smart about our spending. We have a mortgage and other responsibilities." He waved his hand dismissively. "Relax, Anna. We're doing fine. Don't be such a worrywart." That conversation left a sour taste in my mouth. Tom's attitude towards money was so different from mine. I was used to saving, planning for the future, while he seemed to live in the moment, unconcerned about tomorrow. As weeks passed, Tom's behavior started to change in other ways too. He seemed less interested in spending time with me, often opting to go out with his friends instead. Then came the day when Tom dropped another bombshell. He came home early from work, a buoyant smile on his face. "Guess what? I've decided to go part-time at work. I'll be working only till noon," he announced cheerfully as he raided the fridge. I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Part-time? Why? We haven't discussed this." He shrugged, grabbing a beer. "I figured since you're doing so well with your job, I could take it easy. Plus, I want to focus on my hobbies, maybe hit the gym more." I felt a surge of frustration. "Tom, we're a team. Decisions like this should be made together." He looked at me, his expression one of annoyance. "Why are you making a big deal out of this? It's not like we can't afford it." The conversation escalated from there, ending with Tom storming out of the room. I sat there, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. It was around that time that I suggested maybe we should start thinking about having a child, hoping it would bring us closer. Tom's reaction, however, was far from what I expected. "A child? Are you serious, Anna? I think you're a bit too old for that," he said bluntly, not even looking up from his phone. His words stung. I was taken aback by his insensitivity. "Too old? That's a harsh thing to say, Tom." He shrugged. "It's the truth. Besides, I'm not ready to be tied down with kids." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the Tom I married. He used to be considerate, loving. Now, he was turning into someone I hardly recognized. As the days turned into weeks, the distance between us grew. The man I fell in love with was fading away, replaced by someone who seemed to care only about himself. I started to feel more like an ATM than a wife, a provider rather than a partner. The changes in Tom were becoming more pronounced, and it felt like our marriage was on a slippery slope. His part-time job meant he was home more, but not in the way I had hoped. He spent most of his time at the gym or hanging out with friends, leaving me to handle the household chores. One evening, I came home exhausted from work, only to find the house in a mess. Tom was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "You're home early," I commented, dropping my bag. He didn't look up. "Yeah." Gym was crowded. Decided to skip it. I sighed, looking around. "Tom, since you're home more, do you think you could help out with some of these chores?" He frowned, his tone defensive. "What? Now you want me to be a house husband? That's not my thing, Anna." I felt my patience wearing thin. It's not about being a house husband. It's about helping each other out. He shrugged, unmoved. "I don't know, Anna. I have other things to do." I bit back a sharper retort, feeling a growing sense of frustration and loneliness. It was like talking to a wall. He just didn't get it, or he didn't care. I couldn't tell which was worse. The situation worsened when I suggested he could use his free time for something productive, like taking care of the house or cooking. "Me? Cook? Come on, Anna, you know I'm no good in the kitchen." He laughed it off. "But you could learn. It would be helpful," I pressed, hoping he'd see reason. He scoffed. "I have better things to do with my time." I felt a surge of anger. "Like what? Going to the gym and hanging out with your friends?" He rolled his eyes. "You just don't get it, do you? I need my space, Anna." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was not the partnership I had signed up for. I was working full-time, managing the house, and now, apparently, I was expected to be okay, with his complete lack of contribution. The final straw came when I found out about his demands at home. One evening, I came home late from a particularly grueling day at work. "Hey, what's for dinner?" Tom asked as soon as I walked in. I was taken aback. I just got home. I thought maybe you'd have something ready since you were home all day. He laughed, as if I had made a joke. Me? Cook? Come on, Anna. That's your thing. I stood there, disbelief and anger swirling inside me. My thing? What about teamwork, Tom? What about supporting each other? He just shrugged, completely indifferent to my feelings. I went to bed that night feeling more alone than ever. The man I had married, the man I thought I knew, was becoming a stranger to me. Our conversations were now either superficial or arguments. The warmth and connection we once shared seemed like a distant memory. One afternoon, while doing a deep clean, I moved the bed to get to the dust underneath and spotted something glinting against the wall. Reaching down, my heart sank as I picked up an earring that certainly wasn't mine. The cold wave of realization hit me hard. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I turned the earring over in my fingers, a storm of questions and fears swirling in my mind. When Tom returned home later, I confronted him directly. Tom, I found this earring under our bed. It's not mine. Can you explain? He glanced at the earring with a nervous laugh. Where did that come from? Maybe it's from one of your friends. I knew none of my friends owned anything like this. No, Tom. My friends haven't been over in ages. And they don't wear this style. He gave a casual shrug, but I could tell he was uneasy. I don't know, Anna. Maybe it's yours and you forgot about it. I felt frustration building inside me. I know what my jewelry looks like, Tom. This isn't mine. There was a tense silence. Finally, Tom sighed and admitted, okay, it probably belongs to a friend of mine. A friend? My voice trembled with a mix of disbelief and hurt. Yeah, she must have dropped it when she was here, he said, avoiding my gaze. The room seemed to spin as I processed his words. When she was here, in our house, in our bedroom. He gave a half-hearted defense. It's not a big deal, Anna. It was just a visit. I was incensed. Just a visit? You brought another woman into our home, our bedroom? That's a big deal, Tom. He tried to downplay it, but I could see right through his act. You're overreacting, Anna. It was nothing. The conversation escalated from there, ending with Tom storming out and me left alone, feeling a deep sense of betrayal. That night, as I lay in bed, Tom's admission replayed in my mind. I realized that my marriage had hit a point of no return. I couldn't just brush this under the rug. I needed to know the extent of Tom's betrayal, to understand what I was dealing with. The next day, I picked up the phone and dialed an old friend. He was someone I had known for years, someone discreet and skilled in handling sensitive situations. Hey, it's Anna. I need a favor, something personal. I need to know what's really going on when I'm not around. Can you help? There was a brief pause on the other end. Of course, Anna. I know just how to handle this. Let's meet and discuss the details. Then came the incident that broke the camel's back. My father had an accident and needed a wheelchair. I found a state-of-the-art model that would give him some independence, but it was expensive. I didn't hesitate, though. This was my dad, and he deserved the best. I was discussing it on the phone with my mom when Tom walked in. What's that about a wheelchair? He asked, a curious look on his face. I hung up and turned to him. My dad had an accident. I'm buying him a modern wheelchair to help him get around. He raised his eyebrows. Sounds expensive. How much? I told him the amount, and his reaction was shocking. Are you crazy? That's a lot of money, Anna. I was taken aback. It's for my dad, Tom. He needs it. He scoffed. Your dad's old, Anna. Why waste so much money on a wheelchair? You should be saving that for us, for our future. I felt a surge of anger. It's my money, Tom. And it's for my dad. I'm not going to skimp on something he needs. Tom's face turned red. Your money? What about our money? You know what you should be buying instead? That motorcycle I've been looking at. That's a better investment than some old man's wheelchair. I couldn't believe my ears. A motorcycle? You think a motorcycle is more important than my injured father? He shrugged. Yeah, I do. I work hard. I deserve it. I shook my head in disbelief. You barely work, Tom. And even if you did, my father's needs come before your wants. He got in my face, his voice raised. You're being selfish, Anna. All you care about is your family. What about me? What about what I want? I stood my ground. This isn't about you, Tom. This is about my father needing help, and I'm going to give it to him, whether you like it or not. Tom laughed mockingly. You know what, Anna? I married you for your money. You're just an old, ugly woman who I thought would be easy to control. But I see now you're just a fool. If you don't buy me that motorcycle, I'll divorce you. And good luck getting married again at your age. Let's see who'd want you after me. I felt a surge of anger mixed with determination. Reaching into the drawer of the coffee table, I pulled out a folder and slammed it onto the table. These are pictures from a private detective, Tom. They show exactly what you've been up to when I'm not around, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. His smirk faltered as he flipped through the photos, his face turning pale. The images were undeniable proof of his infidelity, his betrayal laid bare for him to see. And this, I continued, pulling out another set of documents, is our divorce paperwork. I'm done, Tom. I'm done being disrespected, lied to, and used. He looked up from the photos, his earlier bravado gone. Anna, please, we can talk about this. I didn't mean those things I said. But it was too late. I had seen the truth behind the man I married, and there was no going back. I've made my decision, Tom. It's over, I said firmly. As he left the house that day, the folder and divorce papers in his hands, I felt a profound sense of relief mixed with sorrow. It was the end of a painful chapter in my life, but also the beginning of a new, albeit uncertain, journey. The divorce proceedings were nothing short of a roller coaster. Tom, in a desperate attempt to salvage what he could, demanded alimony, citing the stark difference between our salaries. His audacity knew no bounds, and the trial turned into a battleground of accusations and legal maneuvers. I sat in the courtroom, my lawyer by my side, clutching the folder that held all the evidence of Tom's infidelity and betrayal. As his demands for alimony echoed through the room, I felt a mix of disbelief and determination. This was the man I had loved, and now he was trying to exploit me one last time. When it was my turn, I presented everything, the photographs from the private detective, bank statements showing his extravagant spending, and testimonies about his lifestyle. The evidence was overwhelming, painting a clear picture of a man who had taken advantage of my trust and love for his own gain. The judge listened intently, flipping through the evidence, his expression unreadable. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally spoke. The court ruled in my favor. Tom's claims for alimony were dismissed, and the divorce was granted on my terms. I remember exhaling a breath I didn't realize I was holding, a weight lifting off my shoulders. It was over. The legal ties that bound me to Tom were severed, and I was free. In the aftermath of the trial, life slowly started to return to a new kind of normal. I focused on rebuilding myself, reconnecting with the parts of me that had been lost in the shadows of my marriage. One day, as I was having coffee with a friend, she mentioned Tom. Have you heard about your ex? He's in deep trouble. Debt's piling up, and I heard he's even hiding from some angry husbands. I sipped my coffee, feeling a sense of closure. Really? Can't say I'm surprised. He made his bed, now he has to lie in it. The conversation moved on, but a part of me felt a sense of vindication. Tom's actions had finally caught up with him. It was a harsh reality, but one he had brought upon himself. As I walked home that day, the sun setting in the distance, I felt lighter. The chapter of my life that was Tom was closed, a bittersweet ending to a story that had started with so much promise. Growing up, I always knew I was different from the rest of my family. My name's Jenny, and I come from a long line of restaurant owners. My dad, Joe, is a big, loud man who runs our family restaurant with an iron fist. Mom, Linda, is his perfect partner, always busy managing the staff. Then there's my older brother, Mike, the golden boy, groomed to take over the business. I remember sitting at the dinner table one night, the air thick with the aroma of Dad's famous roast. Mom was going on about some new recipe they were trying out. "Jenny, you'll love this one. It's got that fancy herb you like." "What's it called again?" Mom asked, her eyes sparkling. "Thyme," I mumbled, picking at my food. Mike laughed from across the table, his mouth full. "Who cares about some dumb herb? Wait till you see the new grill Dad's getting for the restaurant. That's the real deal." Dad nodded, his eyes on me. "Speaking of the restaurant, Jenny, when are you gonna start taking an interest? You're not getting any younger, you know." I tried to make myself small in my chair. "I don't know, Dad. I like being outside, with the plants and stuff." Mom sighed, exchanging a look with Dad. "Plants? What are you gonna do with plants? You need a real job, Jenny. Something to fall back on." I remember feeling a knot in my stomach. It was the same conversation every time. No one in my family got it. No one except Grandma Rose. Grandma Rose lived in a small house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by the most beautiful garden I'd ever seen. She was different from my parents, gentle, patient, and she understood me in a way no one else did. I would often escape to her house, away from the endless talk of the restaurant. One day, I found her in the garden, her hands deep in the soil. "Jenny, dear, come help me plant these tulips," she said, her face bright with a smile. I sat down beside her, feeling the cool dirt on my hands. "Grandma, why don't Mom and Dad understand? I love this. I love being here with the plants." Grandma Rose wiped her brow and looked at me with those wise, old eyes. "Your parents just want what's best for you, Jenny. But they don't see the world the same way we do. There's magic in these plants, in the earth. It's okay to be different." I clung to Grandma Rose's words, even as the pressure from my family grew. Mike would often taunt me, calling me the gardener in a tone that made it sound like an insult. "Hey, gardener, you gonna plant some lettuce for tonight's salad?" he'd jeer, his friends laughing behind him. I'd just roll my eyes and walk away. I knew they didn't get it. They didn't see the beauty in a single leaf, the peace in a morning dew. But I did. And in those moments, with my hands in the soil, I felt like I was where I belonged. High school graduation was like standing at a crossroads, and I, Jenny, was about to take the road less traveled by my family. The house was buzzing with excitement over Mike's plans to join Dad at the restaurant. Amidst it all, I felt like a spectator in my own life. One evening, we were all gathered in the living room. Dad was going on about expanding the restaurant, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "Mike, you're going to be right at the heart of this," he said, clapping my brother on the back. Mike puffed up like a proud rooster. "Yeah, I've got some ideas already, Dad. We're gonna make this place huge." I sat there, fiddling with a loose thread on the couch, feeling invisible. Mom turned to me, her voice sharp like she was waking me up from a daydream. "And what about you, Jenny? Ready to step up? You can handle the front desk, learn the ropes." I took a deep breath. It was now or never. "Actually, I'm not going to work at the restaurant. I'm going to study landscape design," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The room went silent. Dad's face turned red, like a tomato about to burst. "Landscape what now?" he barked. That's no career for you. You're a part of this family, and the restaurant is our legacy. Mike snickered. What are you gonna do? Plant flowers for a living? I felt my cheeks burning. Yes, actually. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm good at it, and I love it. Mom's face was a mix of confusion and worry. Jenny, be sensible. You can't make a living off playing in the dirt. I stood up, feeling a surge of defiance. It's not just playing in the dirt, Mom. It's creating something beautiful, something real. I'm not asking for your approval, but I am telling you, this is my decision. Dad slammed his hand on the table, his voice booming. If you choose this foolishness, you're on your own. Don't expect any help from us. I felt a knot in my stomach, but my voice was steady. Fine, I'll do it on my own. Grandma Rose, who had been quietly knitting in the corner, finally spoke. Her voice was calm but carried weight. Joe, let the girl follow her heart. She's got a gift, and it would be a sin to waste it, she said, her eyes fixed on Dad. Dad let out a frustrated grunt, turning away. Fine, do what you want. But don't come crying to us when it all falls apart. I turned to leave the room, my heart pounding. Mike called out after me, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Good luck, Gardner. Let's see how far those flowers get you. Stepping into college life felt like diving into deep water. It was thrilling, yet daunting. I, Jenny, was far from the familiar paths of my family's expectations, ready to carve my own way in the world of landscape design. I still remember the buzz of the first day in class, the room swirling with the energy of eager students. I found a spot in the back, trying to shrink into the shadows. That's when Zoe, a girl with fire engine red hair and eyes full of mischief, dropped into the seat next to me. Hey, there, newbie, I'm Zoe. First-timer in landscape design? I gave a shy nod. Yeah, I'm Jenny. It's all a bit overwhelming. Zoe's laugh was loud and genuine. You'll fit right in. Wait till you get your hands into the real dirt. It's epic. What dragged you into this world? I hesitated, the sting of my family's disapproval still fresh. I've always loved plants, the outdoors. It's where I feel right, you know. Her grin widened. Perfect place for you then. Classes were a whirlwind of learning and creating. I was absorbing things like a sponge, from the science of soils to the art of design. I was finally speaking a language I loved. After one particularly intense session, Mr. Davidson, our professor, a man as tall and sturdy as an oak, called me over. Jenny, your designs, there's something else. You've got a real knack for this, he said, his voice serious but encouraging. I was stunned. Really? Thank you, Mr. Davidson. I'm just trying to do my best. He leaned forward, his eyes piercing. There's potential in you. Don't let it go to waste. Push harder. His words became my mantra. I started to live in the studio, my designs becoming more ambitious, more expressive. It was exhausting, but exhilarating. But even in those moments of joy, a part of me yearned for my family, despite everything. One quiet evening, I gathered the courage to call home. The phone rang, each tone heavy with anticipation. Finally, Mom's voice came through, sharp like a knife's edge. What do you want, Jenny? Her tone stung, but I pushed on. I just wanted to check in, see how everyone is. She snorted, her voice dripping with scorn. Oh, now you care? After running off to play in the dirt, abandoning your own family. I clenched my teeth, fighting to keep my voice steady. I didn't abandon anyone, Mom. I just chose a different path. Her laugh was bitter. A dead-end path, you mean? Don't expect us to be here waiting when it all crumbles around you. The call ended soon after, leaving a sour taste in my mouth. But it also fueled a fire in me. I dove back into my work with a new intensity, determined to prove not just to my family, but to myself, that I was on the right path. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, and mine came in the form of a phone call during my final year of college. It was Aunt Clara, my mom's sister, her voice shaky and strained. "Jenny, it's about your Grandma Rose. She passed away last night," Aunt Clara said, her voice cracking with emotion. I felt the ground slip away beneath me. Grandma Rose had been my rock, the one person who believed in my dreams. Losing her felt like losing a part of myself. The funeral was a somber affair. My family was there, all stiff and formal. Dad, Mom, and Mike looked like strangers to me. After the service, I overheard Mom talking to Aunt Clara. "I still can't believe she left that house to Jenny. What's she going to do with it? She can barely take care of herself," Mom said, her voice dripping with disapproval. I felt a surge of anger but bit my tongue. I didn't want a confrontation, not there, not then. The will reading was a few days later. Grandma Rose had left me her house, the beautiful garden haven where I had spent countless hours. My family was shocked, their whispers sharp as thorns. "Why would she leave it to Jenny? She's never around anyway," Mike muttered under his breath. Dad's face was like thunder. "This is ridiculous. That house could have been sold, put money into the restaurant." I stood up, my voice steady but firm. Grandma knew I loved that house, that garden. It was where we spent so much time together. I'm going to keep it, just as she wanted. Mom's response was cold and harsh. "So, you're just going to live there alone, playing in the dirt? What a waste." Their words stung, but I had made up my mind. I moved into Grandma's house, immersing myself in the garden she had loved so dearly. I started renovating the place, pouring my heart into every plant, every flower bed. As the months passed, I transformed Grandma's garden into something truly special. It became my sanctuary, a place where I could be myself, away from the judgment and expectations of my family. The day the invitation to Mike's wedding arrived at my doorstep was a day of mixed feelings. It was a fancy piece of paper, golden letters against a white background, representing a part of my life I had left behind. Staring at it, I felt a storm of emotions churn inside me. I decided to go, but on my terms. I dressed in a way that felt true to me, elegant but simple, a far cry from the dirt-stained clothes they remembered. Entering the restaurant, the sights and sounds of my past life engulfed me. I spotted my family across the room. Mom, Dad, and Mike, all decked out, looking like a picture-perfect family. I braced myself and walked over. "Jenny? I didn't think you'd accept the invitation." Mom's voice was sharp, cutting through the noise. "I came to see Mike get married." "It's a family event, isn't it?" I replied, trying to keep my voice level. Mike glanced at me, his smirk familiar and unwelcome. "What's the matter? Ran out of bushes to trim. Decided to play dress up for a change?" I felt a familiar sting, but I brushed it off. "I'm just here to wish you well, Mike." It was then that his bride, a tall woman with a haughty look, chimed in. "Oh, this is the infamous gardener sister? Did you manage to scrub the dirt from under your nails, dear, or is that your natural look?" Her words, sharp and mocking, hung in the air. I clenched my jaw, refusing to let her see how deep they cut. "I clean up just fine, thanks for asking." "Congratulations to you both." Dad's eyes were cold, his voice colder. "Your being here doesn't erase the past, Jenny. You chose your path." Their words were like thorns, but I had grown a thick skin. "I'm not here to rehash old arguments. Just wanted to wish Mike a happy married life." I was quickly ushered to a small table in the corner, away from the family. Sitting there, I could feel the curious stares and hushed whispers. "That's the gardener," they whispered, "the black sheep of the family." But as I sat there, a sense of pride welled up in me. Yes, I was the gardener, the one who had dared to follow her own path. I was no longer the shy, unsure girl they remembered, but a woman who had found her strength, who had bloomed in spite of them. My discomfort only grew as the evening stretched on. Sipping my drink, I tried to make myself invisible, but that plan fell apart when I caught the eye of some guys I knew from childhood, Mike's friends, the same ones who used to join him in mocking me. "Look who's here, the family's little dirt digger," one of them, Jake, jeered as they approached, a sneer plastered on his face. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Actually, it's landscape designer. But I wouldn't expect you to understand the difference." Their laughter was harsh, grating. "Oh, listen to her, thinks she's all high and mighty now. Chris," another one, added with a scoff. I bit back a sharp retort, my hands clenching under the table. "I've worked hard for my success. My job is more than just playing in the dirt." Their amusement was cut short when an elderly man at the next table interjected. He'd been listening, his expression growing increasingly disapproving. "I've seen this young lady's work. The new park downtown, that's hers. It's outstanding. Shows what you know." The group was visibly taken aback, their smugness faltering. Muttering under their breath, they slunk away, their egos bruised. Emboldened, I decided to venture out from my safe corner, mingling through the crowd, dodging glances and whispers. That's when I overheard Mike, speaking to a group of his friends. "She's always been the odd one, more into her plants than real work," Mike said, his voice laced with a mix of amusement and disdain. His friend laughed loudly. "Every family's got its black sheep, huh?" Their words were like a slap, raw and stinging. I walked away, my heart pounding, reminding myself their opinions didn't define me. As I weaved through the crowd, I bumped into my cousin Lucy, a quiet presence in our loud family. "Hey, Jenny. I've seen some of your designs. They're really something," she said, her voice sincere. I managed a small smile. "Thanks, Lucy. It means a lot, especially today." Lucy looked at me, her eyes understanding. "I never agreed with how they treated you. You're doing amazing things. I'm glad you stuck to your path." Her words were a small comfort amidst the thorns of the evening. We chatted briefly, a momentary respite from the tension. As Lucy drifted away, I returned to my corner, feeling the weight of the evening. The loud music, the clinking glasses, and the bursts of laughter around me felt like they were happening in a different world. I sat there, sipping my drink, longing for the celebration to end. The wedding night was winding down, its fancy aura overshadowed by my own tangled feelings. Just when I thought the night couldn't get any more surreal, the mayor, a distant relative of Mike's bride, took the stage for his speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's a delight to be here," he began, his voice booming across the room. "But tonight, I want to highlight a special guest among us, a true star in the world of landscape design, Jenny." Hearing my name, I almost choked on my drink. I stood up hesitantly, feeling like a deer caught in headlights. The mayor beamed at me. "Jenny here is the brilliant mind behind the transformation of our city park. She's a celebrated landscape designer who's won multiple awards for her incredible work. Let's give her the recognition she deserves." The room erupted into applause, a sound that felt foreign to me. I glanced at my family's table and saw them, their faces a mix of shock and embarrassment. Mike's bride leaned towards him, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Is he talking about your sister, the gardener?" Mike mumbled something, looking like he wished the floor would swallow him up. The mayor's praise continued. "Jenny's work has revitalized our city. She's a true talent." Amidst the clapping, I felt a surge of confidence. The mayor's words were like a light, dispelling the shadows of doubt and scorn from my family. Then, seizing the moment, I decided to speak up. "Thank you, Mayor, for your kind words. It's an honor to contribute to our city's beauty." I paused, my gaze sweeping over the crowd, settling on my family. "It's funny, isn't it? How life turns out. Mike, you and your bride are perfect for each other. Your shared talent for rudeness to others is quite remarkable." The room went silent, the air thick with tension. My parents, my brother, and his fiancée blushed deep red, their shame as visible as if I'd slapped them. Mom's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a knife. "Jenny, what are you saying? This is your brother's wedding." I met her gaze, unflinching. "Just speaking the truth, Mom. Something our family seems to struggle with." Mike stood up, his face red with anger. "You can't come here and talk to us like that." I held my ground, my voice steady. "I've earned my right to speak, Mike. Maybe it's time you all listened." The confrontation ended with Mike sitting down, defeated, and the room slowly buzzing back to life. The mayor gave me a nod of respect before moving on. As I sat back down, the weight of the night lifted slightly. I had spoken my piece, stood up for myself in a way I never had before. I was no longer just the gardener or the outcast, I was Jenny, a recognized landscape designer, someone who had grown past her family's narrow expectations. After Mike's wedding, word got out about my success as a landscape designer. People were buzzing about the awards I'd won and the projects I'd aced. It felt like stepping into the sunlight after years in the shadows. And then, my family came calling. One afternoon, while I was busy sketching out a new garden design, my phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice had a sweetness to it that felt out of place. "Jenny, darling, we've been hearing so much about your work. Your father and I are so proud of you," she cooed. I raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's a change of tune." There was a pause on the line. "Well, we were thinking, maybe you could come over. We'd love to see you, catch up on things." I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. "Catch up, or catch onto my bank account?" I shot back. Mom's voice faltered. "Jenny, that's not fair. We're family." The word family hit a nerve. Family? Like when you all but disown me for following my dreams. Seems like family matters when there's money in the picture. Before she could respond, I ended the call. I wasn't about to let them back into my life just because they smelled success. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. Mike was standing there, hands in his pockets, looking everywhere but at me. "Hey, Jenny, can we talk?" he mumbled. I crossed my arms. "This should be good. What do you want, Mike?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I know we haven't been great. But you're doing well, and I was wondering if you could, help me out a bit." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Help you out? After years of calling me the gardener and laughing at my ambitions. Mike's face reddened. "I didn't mean it like that. It's just that things are tough, and..." I cut him off. "Save it, Mike. I'm not your ATM. You and the family made it clear how you felt about me. You can't just waltz back into my life when it's convenient." He opened his mouth to argue, but I stopped him. "No, Mike. You made your bed. Now lie in it." After he left, I sat in my garden, surrounded by the beauty I had created. My phone rang a few more times over the next week, more attempts at reconciliation from my family, but I didn't answer. I was done with their fair-weather affection. I had built a life for myself, one that didn't need their validation or their greed. I was thriving in my own right, and that was all that mattered. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. As I looked around at the plants and flowers that were a testament to my hard work and passion, I realized I had everything I needed right here. I was happy, successful, and free from the toxic ties that had once bound me. This wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the beginning of a whole new book. My book. And I was going to make sure it was a bestseller, written on my own terms, in my own style. The new growth in my life was just starting, and I was ready for whatever came next.